The jungle was not a place for the weak. It was dark, dense, and full of dangers that waited silently behind the trees. Every creature here knew when to stay quiet. But tonight, something was wrong. The silence was broken by sharp, painful screams that echoed deep within the jungle. The sound wasn't from any animal. It was a voice full of fear and agony. A human explorer, walking alone on a narrow path, stopped in his tracks. His name didn't matter here. What mattered was his courage. His heart began to pound fast. He looked around, but the trees were too thick. The screams echoed again, louder this time, carrying pain that chilled his bones. Something or someone was being tortured. Most people would have turned back, fearing what waited ahead. But not him. Curiosity mixed with a strange sense of duty pushed him forward. He had to find out what was happening. Maybe someone needed help, or maybe it was a trap. Either way, he couldn't ignore it. He moved carefully, pushing aside heavy vines and tall grass. The ground was soft, sometimes slippery with mud. Every step made a faint noise, and he knew he had to be quiet. If there were dangerous creatures, he didn't want them to hear him coming. But the screams guided him. He followed the sound like a hunter follows a trail. The deeper he went, the stranger the jungle became. The trees seemed taller, their branches twisting like claws. The air was heavy and smelled of smoke and burnt wood. A faint orange glow flickered in the distance. That could only mean one thing: fire. He crouched low, moving closer to the light. His eyes darted around, watching for movement. Suddenly a shadow moved across the glow. Then another. Figures danced around the fire, their shapes odd and unhuman. His heartbeat quickened. What kind of creatures lived here? The screams grew weaker, but still echoed. The human got close enough to see through the gaps between the trees. What he saw made his stomach turn. There's a large fire burning in the middle of a clearing. Around it danced a group of tribal aliens, their bodies painted with strange symbols, their heads crowned with bones and feathers. They carried sharp spears and sticks with glowing tips. And above the fire, tied to a wooden spit, was a young alien girl. Her skin shimmered in the firelight, a mix of silver and blue. She looked delicate, almost beautiful, but she was in pain. Her arms and legs were tied tightly, and her body hung above the flames. She cried out, her voice weak but desperate. She was being grilled alive like a sacrifice. The human's fists clenched. He had never seen anything like this. He wanted to rush in, cut her down, and fight the creatures. But there were too many of them. They looked wild, dangerous, and eager for blood. One wrong move and he'd be the next sacrifice. He hid behind a thick tree, trying to think. His eyes scanned the clearing, looking for any chance to save her. She screamed again, but this time her head tilted up and she saw him. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Her eyes were big and bright, glowing faintly in the dark. She didn't speak, but her gaze begged for help. She was afraid but also hopeful. She had seen someone who could save her. The human's heart twisted. He couldn't just leave her. But how? The tribe was busy with their ritual, chanting and dancing. They didn't know he was there. That was his only advantage. Then he noticed something near the edge of the clearing barrels. They looked old, with symbols painted on them. Maybe they contained black powder or some kind of fuel. If he could create a distraction, he might have a chance. But time was running out. The girl's cries were getting weaker, her body barely moving. If he waited too long, she wouldn't survive. He had to act. Quietly, he gathered dry leaves, sticks, and rocks. He made a small pile leading from the barrels towards his hiding spot. His hands worked fast but careful. Then he pulled out his knife and a piece of flint from his pouch. He struck the flint, creating small sparks. The first few attempts failed. His heart raced faster, knowing any noise could expose him. Finally, a spark caught on the dry leaves. The small flame grew, spreading along the trail he made. It reached the barrels, and for a second, nothing happened. Then boom! A loud explosion shook the jungle. Flames and smoke shot into the sky. The tribal aliens screamed in panic, scattering in all directions. The ground trembled under the human's feet, but he didn't wait. He sprinted towards the fire, his knife ready. The alien girl was still tied up, her eyes barely open. He cut the ropes quickly, catching her as she collapsed into his arms. Her skin was hot, but she was alive. The tribes were shouting, realizing what had happened. They were coming back, angrier than before. But the human was already running, carrying the girl through the jungle, deeper into the shadows, away from the fire and the danger. The night was still full of screams, but now they came from the tribes chasing the human who had dared to defy them. The human's legs burned as he ran, his arms wrapped tightly around the alien girl. The jungle behind him shook with angry voices, the tribal aliens screaming in rage after the explosion. But he didn't stop. Every muscle in his body screamed to rest, but his mind refused. He had seen too much. That girl in his arms had suffered enough, and if he slowed down, both of them would die. She was so light, almost like she weighed nothing. Her silver-blue skin glowed softly, even in the dark, but her body was hot to the touch, too hot. She was burning up from the heat of the fire she had been tied over. Her breath was shallow, her eyes fluttering, and she whispered strange words he couldn't understand. But even in her weakness, she clung faintly to his shirt, as if her life depended on it. Maybe it did. After running for what felt like forever, he finally stopped by a giant tree with roots so wide they formed a small shelter. He gently laid her down on the soft moss, listening to the sounds of the jungle. The drums in the distance were growing louder. The tribe was still hunting for them. He didn't have much time, but he needed to check on her. He knelt beside her, studying her features. She wasn't like any alien he had ever seen. Her face was soft and smooth, her hair long and shining like silver threads. Strange markings ran along her arms, glowing faintly like lights under her skin. She looked otherworldly, but innocent, nothing like the savage tribes that had tried to burn her alive. "Hey, can you hear me?" the human asked gently. Her eyes opened slowly, just a sliver of bright violet peeking through. She looked at him, confused, weak, but aware. "You're safe now. I pulled you out of that fire," he said, though he wasn't sure if she could understand his words. "But we need to keep moving." She tried to speak, but her voice was nothing more than a dry whisper. He pulled out his canteen, pouring a little water onto his hand and letting it drip into her mouth. She coughed weakly, but the water seemed to help. Why help me?" she managed to ask in a fragile voice. The human paused. He wasn't sure how to answer. He didn't know why himself. Maybe it was the way she looked at him by the fire, her eyes begging, desperate. Or maybe it was just the right thing to do. "Because I couldn't let them kill you," he finally said. A tear slid down her cheek. She tried to lift her hand but didn't have the strength. The human carefully grabbed her hand, holding it. Gently. "They will come," she said weakly. "The tribe. They will find us, they never stop." The human frowned. He had figured that already, but hearing her confirm, it sent a chill down his spine. The jungle was their home. They knew every path, every sound, every smell. He was an outsider here. He needed a plan and fast. "Who are you? Why were they burning you?" he asked. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her fading strength. Then she whispered, "I am Syrixa, daughter of the High Matron of the Velari people. The tribe captured me. They call themselves the Kagra. They think my blood will awaken their god." The human stared, shocked. He had heard rumors of ancient alien tribes worshipping forgotten gods, but this was real. They were ready to sacrifice her for some ancient belief. Then we'll make sure their god stays asleep, the human said, determination flashing in his eyes. Syrixa gave the faintest smile, though it was mixed with pain. You are brave. For a human. He wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but he appreciated it. Suddenly, a horn blew in the distance. The sound was deep and loud, like a call to war. The human knew what that meant. The tribe was getting closer. He stood up, scanning the dark trees. They couldn't stay here. She was too weak to run, and he couldn't fight them all. But the jungle was big, full of caves, rivers, and cliffs. If he could find a place to hide her, maybe they could survive until she recovered. Can you walk? He asked. She shook her head weakly. Not yet. Then I'll carry you, he said firmly. As he picked her up again, Syrixa whispered something strange words in a language he didn't understand. Then suddenly, he felt her presence in his mind, like a soft voice inside his head. This is my gift. I will guide you. I can show you paths only the Velari know. The human blinked, realizing she had some kind of telepathic power, even if weak. He nodded, gripping her tightly. Then guide me, Syrixa. Let's get out of here. With her faint voice in his mind, the human started running again, deeper into the jungle, toward unknown paths that could either lead to safety or straight into a deadlier danger. And behind them, the jungle echoed with the angry roars of the Kagra tribe. The hunt had just begun. The human moved through the dense jungle, carrying Syrixa in his arms, while her faint voice echoed inside his mind. She was guiding him, her telepathic whisper showing hidden paths and warning him of dangers ahead. Still, the night was full of threats. The jungle was alive with sounds, buzzing insects, distant growls, and above all, the dreadful echo of the Kagra tribe's hunting horns. The drums, once distant, were growing louder. The tribe was relentless. Syrix's body was growing colder in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, and every now and then, she twitched in pain. The human knew she couldn't last like this much longer. She needed help, rest, medicine, and safety. But none of those existed here. The only thing he had was his wits and the jungle itself. Then Syrix's voice gently nudged his thoughts. Up ahead, there's an old ruin. My people built it long ago. It may hide us. The human pushed forward, muscles aching, until the trees cleared slightly to reveal crumbled stone walls covered in vines. It was indeed a ruin, ancient and forgotten, half swallowed by nature. Moss dripped from broken archways, and strange symbols were carved into the stones. But it was shelter. He slipped inside, placing Syrixa gently against a wall. She winced softly, but her eyes flickered open. She looked around, her expression mixed with sadness and relief. This place. It was once a temple, she whispered. Temple to what? The human asked, scanning the space for threats. Syrix's eyes darkened. To the stars. My ancestors believed that one day, the stars would send us a savior. The human raised an eyebrow, amused. Guess they didn't expect a scruffy human to fill that role. Syrixa smiled weakly, but her smile faded fast. They're coming. I can feel them. We can't stay long, the human thought hard. He couldn't outrun an entire tribe forever, especially carrying her. Fighting them head-on was suicide. He needed a plan, a distraction big enough to send them running. His mind raced, thinking back to the explosion he'd made earlier. That idea had worked. Maybe he could do something similar, but bigger. Then. His eyes landed on the broken stone pillars around them. Some had hollow spaces filled with dried plant matter and dust. A memory sparked in his head. Back on his homeworld, certain old stones, when mixed with dry rot and friction, could create a flash fire. If he could build a trap using the materials here, maybe he could create a sudden explosion of flame and smoke to scare the Kagra away. He turned to Syrixa. I need your help. Are there any plants or materials nearby that can catch fire fast? Syrix's eyelids fluttered. Yes, there is a flower, bright red, shaped like a claw. The petals burn hot, but they grow close to water. The human nodded. He couldn't leave her alone for long. But without the material, they had no hope. He propped her carefully against the wall, placing his knife in her hand. I'll be back, if anything finds you. You stab first, understand? She gave a weak nod. He then sprinted out, following the faint sound of running water he had heard. Earlier, the jungle seemed to close in on him, branches scratching his face and arms. He was running on pure instinct, driven by the need to protect a girl he barely knew. Soon, he found a small stream. And there, growing along the banks, were the flowers Syrixa described bright red with claw-shaped petals. He gathered as many as he could, stuffing them into his pack. As he turned to leave, a sharp sound caught his ear, a whistle. He wasn't alone. From the shadows, a Kagra scout stepped out, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The alien's mouth opened, letting out a piercing shriek to alert the others. The human reacted fast. He threw a stone at the scout's head, then bolted. Through the trees. The shriek continued behind him, more voices joining in. The chase was on. Branches slapped his face, thorns tore at his arms, but he didn't stop until the ruins were in sight. He burst in, breathing hard. Syrixa looked up weakly. They're here, he panted. Prepare the trap, she whispered. Clutching the knife tightly, the human worked quickly, spreading the red flowers, mixing them with the dry plant matter he had gathered earlier. He tied pieces of his clothing into bundles, soaking them in water to delay the flames, then set everything around the entrance. Just as he finished, dark figures appeared between the trees. The Kagra, dozens of them, chanting, their eyes glowing with bloodlust. The human struck his flint, sparks flying. The petals caught fire instantly, flames racing up the makeshift trap. Then whoosh, a sudden blast of fire and smoke shot out, engulfing the entrance. The Kagra screamed, stumbling back, some falling to the ground in terror. The ruins glowed. With the sudden light, casting eerie shadows, the human grabbed Syrixa, dragging her deeper into the ruins. The fire wouldn't hold them forever, but it bought them time. He found a hidden tunnel under a collapsed pillar, just wide enough for them to crawl through. As they escaped into the darkness, Syrixa whispered, "You are clever." For a human, he smiled faintly. "Let's hope I'm clever enough to get us both out alive." And with that, they disappeared into the blackness of the ruins, the angry cries of the Kagra fading behind them. For now, the tunnel was tight and cold, the air damp and heavy with the scent of ancient stones. The human crawled forward, dragging Syrixa behind him carefully, making sure her fragile body didn't hit the jagged rocks. Every movement was slow, but he had no choice. Above them, the Kagra tribe would soon realize the fire was a trick. Time was their enemy. Syrixa's breathing was faint, but her mind remained connected to his through her weakening telepathic link. "Keep going. There is light ahead. A chamber." He pushed harder, his arms burning from the effort. The tunnel suddenly widened into a hidden underground room. Faint light from cracks in the stone ceiling allowed him to see. The chamber was massive, with walls covered in glowing alien symbol stars, maps and figures that looked like Syrixa's people. He laid her gently on the stone floor. She shivered slightly, her skin pale blue instead of silver now. She was fading. The human searched the chamber for anything useful. In one corner, he found what looked like ancient urns filled with dried herbs. He sniffed them. They smelled sharp and bitter, but familiar. Maybe they had healing properties. He crushed some of the leaves, adding water from his canteen, and pressed the mixture gently to Syrixa's lips. She drank slowly, her face twitching as the bitter taste spread on her tongue. But soon, her breathing eased just a little. "You're not giving up yet," the human whispered. Suddenly, a deep thud echoed from the tunnel behind them. The Kagra had entered the ruins. The human's heart sank. They had found the tunnel too. The time for hiding was over. "We need to move," he muttered. Syrinx stirred, her voice weak but steady in his mind. "There's another way, a path only the Valari know." Her finger pointed to a section of the wall where symbols formed a circle. The human inspected it. It wasn't just a wall, it was a hidden door. He pressed the center of the circle. At first, nothing happened. Then the wall trembled and a stone panel slid open, revealing a spiral staircase going down into the dark. Without wasting time, he picked up Syrixa and hurried down the steps. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, but the sounds of the Kagra grew fainter. The staircase opened into a massive cavern where glowing crystals lit the space with a soft blue hue. A narrow path ran along a deep underground river that roared. Like a beast in the dark, the human was in awe. He had never seen anything like this. The cavern looked untouched for centuries, but now it was their only escape route. Syrix's voice echoed faintly in his mind. "Follow the river. It leads to the surface, but beware. The river beast guards the way." "The river beast?" The human muttered. "You couldn't mention that sooner?" Syrixa gave a tiny smile despite her weakness. "You didn't ask." With no other choice, the human followed the path by the river, the sound of rushing water growing louder. The air was misty, and the glow of the crystals cast strange shapes on the walls. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet. A loud splash echoed through the cavern. From the depths of the river, a massive shadow rose. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, part serpent, part crocodile, with scales that shimmered like wet metal. Its eyes glowed orange, and its mouth was wide enough to swallow them whole. The river beast roared, the sound shaking the cavern walls. It had smelled them prey in its territory. The human cursed under his breath. He couldn't fight a monster like that, not while carrying Syrixa. He scanned the path and saw an old, broken bridge of stones ahead. If he could reach it, maybe he could cross before the beast attacked. But the river beast was fast, swimming alongside the path, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Syrixa opened her eyes faintly. "Let me help." Before he could stop her, she raised her hand weakly and whispered words in her own language. The glowing crystals around them pulsed brightly. A hum filled the air, and the beast hesitated, its eyes blinking as if confused. "Can distract it," she said, her strength fading with every word. The human knew she couldn't hold it for long. He sprinted forward, feet pounding on the narrow path, the stone bridge just a few meters ahead. The beast roared again, shaking off the confusion. Diving after them, with a final burst of speed, the human jumped onto the bridge. The stones wobbled under his weight, some breaking and falling into the river below. He didn't stop. He crossed to the other side just as the beast lunged, its jaws snapping inches from his legs. They made it across, but the bridge collapsed entirely behind them, cutting off the beast. It roared in frustration but couldn't follow. The human collapsed on the ground, breathing hard, still holding Syrixa. She smiled faintly, her face pale. "But alive. You're fast," she whispered. "You're crazy," he replied with a grin. "But thanks." They had escaped the river beast, but the jungle and the Kagra tribe were still out there. And as they rested in the glowing cavern, both knew this was just the beginning of their dangerous journey to freedom. The human sat in the glowing cavern, breathing heavily, his back pressed against the cool stone wall. His arms were shaking not from fear, but from pure exhaustion. Syrixa rested beside him, her body still weak, but her breathing was steady now. She had survived the river, the collapsing bridge, and the terrible beast, but her strength was fading like the last embers of a dying fire. For a while, the only sound was the rumble of the underground river and their tired breaths. But the human knew they couldn't stay here for long. If the Kagra didn't find another way into the cavern, something else might. This jungle seemed full of things that loved to kill. He stood up, scanning the cavern walls. Then his eyes landed on a narrow tunnel partly hidden behind a fallen crystal. Unlike the open paths, this tunnel was dark and small, almost like a forgotten crack in the earth. Syrinx's mind touched his thoughts again. That path, it leads to the surface. But no one has used it for centuries. Perfect, the human muttered. If no one's used it, maybe the Kagra don't know about it either. He lifted Syrinxa carefully. She was lighter than ever, her silver-blue skin dull from exhaustion. Yet her eyes, though weak, still carried a spark of determination. Together, they entered the tunnel, the walls pressing close on either side. Tunnel was damp and twisted like a snake. Sometimes they had to crawl, sometimes climb over sharp rocks. At one point, the human slipped, nearly falling into a pit, but caught himself just in time. Hours passed, or maybe it was less. The darkness made time feel strange. Then, up ahead, a faint breeze stirred the air. The human smiled. Fresh air. They were close to the surface, but then Syrinxa groaned in pain. Her body shivered violently, her breathing shallow again. The human stopped immediately. She was burning up again, her forehead hot against his hand. "Hey, stay with me," he whispered. Her mind brushed his again, weak and trembling. "My body, it is failing. The flames damaged me more than I thought." His stomach twisted. He had saved her from the Kagra, from the river, from the beast, but now she was dying anyway. He couldn't let that happen, but what could he do? Then she whispered something strange. "There's a cure outside. A flower. Bright and white. It glows in the dark." "What does it do?" he asked. "It heals my kind. But it's rare. It only grows where moonlight touches the jungle." The human didn't hesitate. He laid her down gently in the tunnel, placing his jacket beneath her head. "Don't move. I'll get it. Be careful," she whispered. "The jungle. It watches." He gave a half smile. "Then I'll watch it back." He climbed the final steps of the tunnel and emerged from a crack in a rocky cliff. Night had fallen, and the jungle was bathed in silver moonlight. The air was cool and filled with the sound of distant creatures. He scanned the area. Somewhere here, that glowing white flower had to exist. He crept through the trees, every sense sharp. The jungle was alive with noises, but he moved quietly. His footsteps soft against the ground. Minutes passed before he saw it, a soft glow among the roots of an ancient tree. The flower stood alone, its petals shining white under the moonlight, its light gentle but clear. He stepped forward carefully. As he reached for the flower, a low growl stopped him cold. From the shadows, two eyes glowed, then another pair. And another. Creatures with sharp teeth and lean bodies circled him, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. Jungle predators. The human cursed under his breath. He didn't have weapons strong enough to fight them all. But then he remembered fire. The beasts feared fire. He pulled a lighter from his pocket, one he had nearly forgotten he carried. He grabbed a thick stick, lit the end, and waved the burning torch. The predators hissed, backing away slightly but not leaving. He had only one chance. Grabbing the flower quickly, he waved the torch in wide circles, shouting loudly to scare them. The noise, the fire, and his wild movements made the creatures hesitate, just long enough for him to back away, step by step, until he was far from their reach. Breathing hard, flower in hand, he returned to the tunnel and rushed back to Syrinxa. She was barely awake, her lips pale. He crushed the glowing flower's petals, mixing them with water, then carefully poured it into her mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, color returned to her cheeks. Her skin shimmered faintly again, the glow returning. Her eyes opened, clearer this time. She looked at him, a weak smile forming. "You did it." He smiled back, tired, but relieved. "Told you I'd watch the jungle back." She chuckled softly, then whispered, "We need to keep moving. The Kagra." They are still coming. The human helped her sit up. She was still weak, but alive. They weren't safe yet, but the surface was close. Together, they stood and prepared to continue, deeper into the tunnel that would lead them back to the surface, and back into a jungle that was still full of unknown dangers. But now, at least, they had hope. The tunnel walls grew warmer as the human helped Syrixa walk, her arm draped weakly over his shoulder. The flower's magic had saved her, but she was still fragile. Yet her mind remained sharp. She kept her telepathic link open, whispering to him whenever danger lurked near. After a steep climb, they finally emerged from the tunnel into the open night. The jungle stretched around them, silver under the moonlight. The air was fresh, but the feeling of safety didn't last. Then Syrixa stopped suddenly, her eyes wide and frightened. "They're close," she whispered into his mind. "The Kagra, they followed our scent." The human turned his head, and then he heard it, the sound of war drums in the distance. Slow, heavy beats that echoed like the heartbeat of the jungle itself. He cursed under his breath. The Kagra were hunting them, and they were close. "We have to move." "Now," the human said. He pulled Syrixa along gently, but quickly, moving through the trees. The jungle was darker now, the moonlight blocked by thick branches overhead. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made his heart pound faster. But the Kagra were faster than he feared. Soon, Syrixa whispered again, her mental voice full of panic. "They're splitting up. Surrounding us." He looked around frantically. The path was too open. They would be trapped easily here. That's when his eyes caught sight of a large hollow tree, its trunk wide enough for both of them to hide inside. He helped Syrixa climb in first, then squeezed himself in beside her. They held their breath, pressing close together. The hollow was dark and damp, but it concealed them well. Moments later, the Kagra arrived. Shadows passed by their hiding place, alien voices speaking in low, guttural tones. The human could feel their presence through the tree bark-heavy footsteps, the clinking of weapons, the rustle of feathers and bones. Then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped. Silence hung heavy. A Kagra voice shouted a command, and the human felt his blood freeze. They were checking the trees. One wrong sound, one cough, and they'd be found. He kept his hand over Syrix's mouth gently, though she didn't need the reminder to stay quiet. Her eyes watched him, wide and full of fear. Then a sharp, spear-like tool stabbed through the hollow wall, just inches from the human's face. He held his breath, not moving. The spear withdrew, and for a painful moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the Kagra moved on. The human let out a shaky breath. They had barely avoided death. Once the sounds faded, Syrixa whispered, "They will come back. We must go." They slipped out quietly, but now the jungle felt even more dangerous. They had to move smarter, not just faster. That's when Syrixa pointed ahead weakly. There, the whispering trees. He looked. In the distance, a strange patch of trees swayed gently, even though there was no wind. Their leaves shimmered, making soft whispering noises like voices. Syrixa explained in his mind, "The trees can hide our scent. My people used them to vanish from hunters." With no better choice, they headed for the shimmering grove. As soon as they stepped among the whispering trees, a strange sensation covered them, like being wrapped in cool mist. The whispers grew, louder but still soft, as if the trees spoke secrets no one understood. They rested briefly, hidden among the trunks. The human watched Syrixa closely. She looked better than before, but still too weak to run if needed. He knew they couldn't hide forever. Then Syrixa whispered, her voice now slightly stronger, "We're close to the stone bridge. Once we cross it, the jungle changes. My people's scouts may find us there." It was the first real hope he'd heard since this began. "Then let's reach that bridge," the human said. But just as they prepared to leave the protection of the whispering trees, A bone horn sounded nearby. The Kagra had caught their trail again. The human grabbed Syrinx's hand tightly. They ran. The jungle blurred around them, branches cutting their skin, roots nearly tripping their feet. Behind them, the Kagra roared and shouted, their heavy steps shaking the ground. They ran until the trees opened up, revealing a massive stone bridge hanging over a deep gorge. The moonlight illuminated its ancient stones, covered in moss but still strong. The human didn't hesitate. They ran onto the bridge, but halfway across, the Kagra appeared at the start of the bridge, howling in rage. The human turned to face them, pulling Syrinx behind him. He had one last weapon, his flint and the last of the red claw petals he had kept. He quickly lit them, creating a small fire. Then he threw it at the middle of the bridge. The flames caught, the old dry moss burning fast. The Kagra screamed in anger, but stopped as the fire spread. The human and Syrinx ran to the other side, just as the bridge began to weaken under the flames. When they reached the far side, they stopped and looked back. The Kagra stood on the opposite end, howling, their path blocked by fire and the crumbling stones. For now, they were safe. Syrinx smiled faintly, her strength returning slowly. "You think like a warrior," she said weakly. The human chuckled. "No, I think like someone who really doesn't want to get eaten." They laughed softly, despite their exhaustion. The stone bridge was behind them, the jungle ahead still. Dangerous, but hope was finally within reach. The human and Syrinx stood on the far side of the crumbling stone bridge. Their bodies weak, their clothes torn, but their spirits unbroken. Behind them, the Kagra tribe screamed in frustration, their path blocked by flames and falling stones. But the human knew this wouldn't stop them forever. The tribe would find another way across. Syrinx placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes glowing faintly again. "We are near. Just a little further and my people will sense me." Her telepathic strength was returning, but her body still trembled. The human nodded, tightening his grip on the small knife that had become his only real weapon. Together, they moved into the jungle again, but now the air felt different, lighter, the trees thinner, the sky above wider. Then Syrinx stopped. She closed her eyes, focusing hard. "I've sent my signal. They'll come," she whispered into his mind. "How long?" the human asked, watching the dark trees behind them. But before she could answer, a distant roar echoed through the jungle. The Kagra had found another path. They were coming. Faster this time, the human cursed under his breath. They had come too far to die here. He scanned the area, but there was nowhere to hide. Then his eyes caught something, an old stone statue, half buried in vines, standing tall like a forgotten guardian. "We make our stand here," he said firmly. Syrinx looked at him with worry. "You can't fight them all." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can slow them down until your people arrive." He helped her sit beside the statue, then stood in front of her, knife in hand. His legs were shaking, his body sore, but he stood tall, staring into the jungle where the drums and roars grew louder. Then the Kagra appeared, dark shapes moving between the trees, eyes glowing like hungry beasts. The human gripped his knife tighter, ready for the end. But just as the first Kagra leapt forward, the sky above them cracked with light. A beam of bright energy shot down, hitting the ground between them. The Kagra stumbled back, growling in confusion. Then came the sound, a deep hum that made the air vibrate. Above the trees, massive alien ships descended silently, their silver surfaces glowing under the moonlight. The human's mouth dropped open in awe. They were unlike anything he had seen, sleek, majestic, powerful. From the ships, beams of light shot out, and figures appeared, Velari warriors, tall and elegant, their armor glowing softly. Their eyes shone with the same faint glow as Syrinx's, and in their hands were weapons far more advanced than any human tech. The Kagra roared in anger, but knew they stood no chance. The Valari warriors moved with grace, surrounding the Kagra swiftly, forcing them to retreat back into the shadows of the jungle. The human stood still, breathing heavily, his knife still raised. Then one of the Valari stepped forward, his eyes studying the human with curiosity and respect. Syrixa, weak but alive, called out to them. He saved me. He crossed the jungle, faced the Kagra, the river beast, all to save me. The Valari warrior, who seemed to be their leader, looked at her, then back at the human. He lowered his weapon, then bowed his head slightly in respect. You have done something no other human has ever done, the leader said in a smooth voice. You have earned the gratitude of the Valari. The human chuckled weakly, lowering his knife. I'll take gratitude, and maybe a ride home. Syrixa laughed softly, her voice filled with relief. She looked at him with warm eyes. You are not just brave. You are clever, kind, and stubborn. You saved me when I had no hope. The Valari helped her to her feet, supporting her gently. She looked back at the human. Come with us. My people must know your courage. He smiled faintly. I'm just an explorer. But yeah, sure, why not? I've come this far. A beam of light from the ship bathed them both, and slowly they lifted off the ground. As they rose above the jungle, the human looked down. The Kagra watched from the shadows, their eyes glowing, but they made no move out above the trees. The jungle looked peaceful, the nightmare of the hunt finally ending. The human stood beside Syrixa on the ship, gazing at the stars above. Guess I'm part of the stars now, huh? He said with a grin. Syrixa smiled, her strength returning with every moment. Yes, and the stars remember their heroes. As the ship soared into the sky, leaving the deadly jungle far below, the human knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just an explorer anymore. He was a survivor, a protector, and now a legend among the stars.